I am not a runner. When I was younger, I I kind of was. Uh, I when I was a grade school boy, we lived in Meade, Kansas, a little town in southwest Kansas between Dodge City and Liberal. Its claim to fame was it had one of the Dalton gang hideouts. Anyway, excuse me. When I would get very frustrated, which was not too often, but it was fairly often actually, I would run out the front door and run around our block until I just had essentially what I'd done is I'd burned up the adrenaline. And so, yeah, I ran. When I was in junior high, I've never been a really good long distance runner, but I was a good sprinter until I broke my foot. And then that all ended. Now I'm in my 70s. I hardly ever run. It's kind of like there's just no good reason to. Running, though, in the Bible sense here in Hebrews chapter 12, is symbolic. And the writer, beginning in verse 1, writes, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Talked about that last time. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. One of the things about running and plowing a field is similar, sort of the same. If you want to run in a race, the best strategy is to run in a straight line, right? It's the shortest points of the shortest distance between 2 points. If you begin moving, left and right, you're lengthening the race. How do you stay in a straight line? You keep your eye on that finish line, that point out there. Well, I'm told, I've never plowed, but I'm told the guys that were able to keep the furrows straight are the guys that kept their eye up on the end of the row rather than, right in front of the tractor. I just think, here's the thing. If we want to run this race, this metaphorical race of life, and we want to run it well, then we need to fix our eyes not just on the next step, but on, well, he says, fix our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. This is there are lots of things in there, so let's just kind of unpack it. Fix your eyes. If you're going to fix your eyes, what does that mean? Fixing my eyes. Okay, I'm going to look right at you. Have you ever talked to somebody who they just apparently were unable to fix their eyes? They're always darting around, and it's a little frustrating to me. But for us running the race, we don't even fix our eyes on a spot across the finish line. Part of the reason for that is I don't know where the finish line is, but I do know Jesus. How do I fix my eyes on him? Going to come back to that in a minute, and then, but before we do that, let's look at the author and perfecter, the pioneer and perfecter, the old King James Version, the author and finisher of our faith. Jesus sets the mark. You want to know what perfect faith is? Boy, don't look at me. And the truth is, you're going to be disappointed if you look at any other human for this perfect faith. There's only one, and that's Jesus, the pioneer. This is the New International Version's translation, the pioneer of our faith. What does a pioneer do? Well, one of the things that a pioneer does is they go where there's no road. I think about where the road is not very well, trenched. Every time I drive from Las Vegas over to Oklahoma or Kansas, especially when I drive back, because from Oklahoma City until you get outside of Albuquerque is a pretty flat run. And then in Albuquerque, you run into mountains. And I think if I'd have been a pioneer, coming across the plains, I would have thought, man, we can make pretty good distance every day because it's flat. It's also dry, so you have to factor that in. But when they got to the mountain ranges, there are times I wonder, how in the world was the U.S. populated west of this mountain range? It was because pioneers are not satisfied with where they are. Their satisfaction comes from going. Jesus was the pioneer of our faith and the perfecter of our faith. Okay. He's our hero. That's the simplest way for me to put it and to think of it. But he says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, or fix our eyes on Jesus. How do we do that? I don't know a perfect, surefire way every time. People are different. I'm different than you. What works for me might not work for you. And here's an aspect that I don't like. What worked for me last month or last week might not work for me this week sometimes. You ever get there? I'll tell you though, something that I found very helpful, maybe you will too, is to get back to the biographies of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I spent last year reading them over and over and over again, and I wish I could say it transformed my life. It helped me a ton. If I was looking for this life transformation, then that's not really what happened for me. But I did get it in my mind who Jesus was and what he did. That's the point of a biography, isn't it? Is to tell you who they were and what they did. And from time to time, why they did what they did. If I'm going to fix my eyes on Jesus, this is metaphorical, obviously. But if I fix my eyes on him, then he becomes the focal point for my effort. We're called on to run this race with endurance, fixing our eyes on Jesus. My eyes are not fixed on Jesus. This is a marathon. I am, if I'm going to, do this, then I've got to run with perseverance. That's the only way you're going to ever finish a marathon. My eyes have to be fixed on Jesus. I've got to interpret life through what I know about Jesus. This is easy to say. It's not easy to do. I even think part of why this is not easy to do is because life is not static. If it would just settle, I could fix my eyes on Jesus, and I'm hooked. There it is. I'm done. I did it. I got it. It doesn't work that way for me because my life is not static. It's more static now than it's been in, oh gosh, since I was in preschool, I guess. Oh, wait a minute. I never have preschool. I didn't even get to go to kindergarten. But now my life is static, pretty static. But I mean, that's my schedule. But life itself, there's just this constant movement and adjustment. It's dynamic in nature. And fixing my eyes on Jesus, the dynamic nature of life creates, for me, a challenge in fixing my eyes on Jesus. I have this sense that to run the race with perseverance, I'm not talking about physical marathon. I don't ever see myself doing that. But I am running the race of life. And to do that with perseverance, endurance, grit, I got to fix my eyes on Jesus. I have to intentionally process the question, the old question that back in the 90s became Christian jewelry, WWJD. What would Jesus do? Well, for certain things, we know what Jesus would do because we know what he did. There are other things that it's not quite as clear from the biographies, the Gospels. So, what would Jesus do? I got to say, there's certain times I'm not sure what he would do, but I think from what I understand of his nature, his behaviors, his teachings, and then the observable life that's been recorded for us in the Gospels, it's somewhere between a predictive and kind of guessing, educated guesses, though. I don't know everything Jesus would do. I can't answer that for every circumstance in my life. But if my days begin and run with the idea of what would it look like if my eyes are fixed on Jesus, what's the point? For me to know him and know how he would live, how he would make choices. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to, I've already said it, I'm not going to get it right every time. But my goal is to live as best I can and as best I know how, as Jesus did. Making choices on the basis of what I understand of his motivation, his character, his nature. He's the pioneer, the perfecter of our faith. And to fix our eyes on him means that he becomes the primary point of focus for my life. When that happens, interesting to me is the fact that I become more available to him for his purposes, his design, which means I become more available to the people around me. And I'm a selfish person. Without some external help, from the help of God's grace and the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of Christ at work in me, people around me, they get in the way because they don't know what I want. But if I fix my eyes on Jesus, it's at least the starting point for living an unselfish life. All right, that's enough. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.